All right, this feels like a video for maybe which I should have prepared a bit more, but going along with what this series is about and just kind of talking extemporaneously about things that are going on, developments with attempting to plant the Potter's Church. I had a question on, I guess it was must have been just the last video. I didn't even pay that much attention to which one it was on. I probably should have done that. But somebody wanted to ask whether we were going to be pursuing 501c3 status, whether we were going to become a nonprofit, tax exempt organization. And that's a good question. And this is kind of an inside thing that I don't think a lot of people generally think about. And not that they even necessarily should, but this is some insight into the process, which is again what this series is all about. And I don't actually have an answer at this point. And so that's kind of the other insider thing I guess you can look at is just coming from the fact that I'm not a lawyer. There's a lot that goes into that maybe doesn't require being a lawyer, but that does require a good bit of research that I haven't done yet. But I do know that there are a few potential serious issues involved with doing this. And the first one, maybe the one that most people are going to think about, has to do with speech. Because I have been very clear in the Quest Forums ministry where I stand on some issues that are considered political, just because I do believe that there's a lot of intersection. There's not too many things that touch all of life the way that politics and religion do. And there's so many questions where the ways that we interact as a society, they have to do with our deeply held beliefs, our religious beliefs. And everybody has them to one extent or another and expresses them to one extent or another. I've been pretty open where that's concerned. And there is this issue when it comes to tax exempt status, where there's something called the Johnson Amendment. This is kind of the biggest thing that it centers around. It was something that Lyndon Johnson had put in place back when he was a senator, before he became vice president and later president, in order to, if I remember the story correctly, he wanted to punish a couple of ministers from Texas who were political opponents of his. And so he basically inserted this into the tax code to make it so that the IRS could rescind tax exempt status for churches if they spoke on political subjects, and especially if they endorsed or condemned a particular political candidate. And so this was, I don't even really know how he got it passed in the first place. Just, I guess, because of his overmastery of the Senate. All this really boiled down to is him trying to hold down people who disagreed with him. That's the sort of thing that the First Amendment was actually put in place to prevent, and here he worked around it anyway. So the thing about the Johnson Amendment, as far as I know, it's never even actually been enforced. And so what the IRS will occasionally do, if they decide that they want to pick on a church or on a ministry of some type of tax exempt organization, they first of all they tell you in your application that you are not allowed to endorse candidates, and then if you do, then they will basically send you a letter and they'll say, hey, you better stop this or we're going to rescind your tax exempt status. They've never done it. They've never actually, again, as far as I know, they've never actually followed through on that threat. They just expect people to be afraid as a result of the threat and then back down. And so they know that the courts, as they exist currently, that they would not put up with that. It's too obvious that it's unconstitutional. It goes directly against the First Amendment. And so it would be struck down, and then they wouldn't have that power to wield against anyone anymore. And that largely seems to be the reason why people are afraid, or because of those threats, and without realizing that they are, for the most part, empty. Now, a few weeks ago, he's out of the race now, but Beto O'Rourke made a threat that if he became president, that he was going to really start enforcing it, and he was going to take away tax-exempt status from churches that weren't on his side, particularly of the gay marriage issue. And so you do have that threat that exists, that you might eventually have politicians that really do want to cram it down our throats. And that is something to be concerned about, but it's not my primary concern when it comes to whether or not to go after 501c3. I'm more concerned about, and again, not a lawyer, so this is the thing I really don't understand. This is the thing I'm going to be looking into to make a decision on, and that I'm really going to need some other people to be looking into also to see what our decision should ultimately be. Because as I understand it, when it comes to incorporating anything, not just a nonprofit, but a business, anything else, you have to get your charter from the state in order to do that. And most state charters, and I think Pennsylvania is like this too, which is where I am, they say something along the lines of the state, the state in which you live, but the state as the government also, that they own the corporation, that it's a creature of theirs and it belongs to them. And that's where I have this issue where I'm a little bit worried that maybe that's something that we should want to avoid because the church belongs to God. I mean, that's part of the element of this name as well. The potter of the potter's church is God. He's the one who's forming us. And so my issue is the message that could potentially send. Now, I do want to make it clear, too, and I put this in the conversation that I had with the guy who brought this up in the first place. I don't think, I'm not really concerned so much that that's about the government taking it over directly, because that's not the way this has worked. It's not like, again, as far as I know, that this is pretty old. It probably has more to do with common law than with anything else, where it's just the idea that corporations have personhood. They're recognized by courts as persons for legal purposes. And so the state creates them in the sense that it recognizes the reality of them and also of their duties and of their rights. And so that is important. It provides protections both to the corporation and to society. So I understand where that is coming from. I'm just wondering, what do other churches think about this, or are there ways to work around it? Like, I know there are things called associations that you can do for tax exempt status, and maybe that would be better, especially where a church is concerned. It might be a little different than for something like Quest Forums. And is this something that is maybe just overall wrong? Maybe should be reworded somehow. Obviously not something I'm going to be accomplishing, but I'm just kind of speculating here. Is it something that's not good to say that corporations of any type are a creation of the state and that they're, again, owned by it? But it is about accountability. It's, at least at this point, it's not about control. It's not like it's a communist thing. It's not saying like the collective owns all of this. But it is more about who's the ultimate authority. That's what I'm worried about. If we're saying that the church belongs to the government, then are we saying that the church does not belong to God? And I don't know. I don't have an answer to that, but it is one of the things that I'm thinking about that's going into what the direction of this decision is going to be, because the benefits are pretty obvious too. If you have the tax exempt status, then that is good for the church. Because of what it doesn't have to be treated as, it doesn't have to pay taxes, it doesn't have to worry about producing profits, because it's not the type of corporation that's looking to hand money back to any investors. It's just about being what it's called to be, being the force in the community for the gospel and for the growth of believers. And so that should be the focus, and that's where the money should all go to, without having to worry about paying anyone back or paying the government back. And then there's also just kind of the, I guess, more practical element. But if churches have tax exempt status, then people who give to them, who make donations and make offerings, that information gets collected, and then that can be helpful on their tax returns too. And so it does have some positive benefits, and it's just a matter of weighing out whether those positives are better than the potential negatives. And so that's the question. It's one of those insider things that I'm dealing with that maybe you've never thought of before. And so hopefully found that interesting, or maybe you have thought of it. Maybe you've been involved with a church that's had to navigate this. And if you have, then I'd love to hear from you, because that could be really helpful information for me to gain as well. But I just appreciate anyone who's come along to check this out, your interest in this process. If you have any questions or are curious about getting involved in any way, then you can reach out to me either through the comments or my email address and Facebook are in the description. You can get a hold of me that way as well. Thanks so much for checking out this video, and especially for praying. I hope that you're doing that. Maybe this video is about to end, or right before you move on to anything else, if you just say a quick prayer that the Lord continues to guide this process and send us the people, the resources, the opportunities that we need in order to have an impact here in Westmoreland County. That I know, like I talked about in one of these previous videos, there's a lot of different ways that people can get involved, and this is just our small corner of it, but it's a good place to be, and I really do have high hopes for it, and I pray for that every day, and I hope that you'll join me in doing so. And until next time, the next one of these videos, keep looking up.